It's alright, Phyllis, exclusive weuka wetusinzira okuba nte munange tukusaka amawulire niyo comfort zone naona awo sinzira okubanga otulaba ne wekanya biki ebitambula mu ggwanga lya Uganda abera seso nza kuletera ensonga noberanga ozekanya ane wekanya biki ebyasobodde okutuuka gyotabadde ate munange nembi kutusizaawo niyo comfort zone naona wo sinzira okubanga okakaleba emirimu gy'wabula ate n'ofisa okeddaaki okubanga wekanya biki ebitambula mu ggwanga lyo kale nno olunaku olwaliro lwanjawulo muko okusinziira nti ate munange amazaalibwa gange gwe naagala okubanga ojaguzaako nange oba kosobola okubanga obuntera mu comment section wabula ate Wednesday de kumpewo nsobola kugamba nti ate president wa National Unity Platform His Excellency Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu ye yakawanga mundeda mu mbeera okuba nti ate munange asituse ne ttiimu ye y'abannamateeka bonna ku side ya National Unity Platform uli omukulu Kanso Nalukola omukulu Kanso Muyizi ng'ate naye yennyini Kanso His Excellency Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu ensonga zino azikukuka bulungi nnyo kale nno babadde ku Uganda Law Society ne babeera nga bakunyakunya abo bonna aba National Resistance Movement gattako ne balooya abava mu bibiina ebyenjawulo wabula ate nga bali wansi ew'ekkubo eryo kale nno bibadde biwanvu nnyo bwayogedde ku nsonga ezinyigiriza ekibiina ekya National Unity Platform wabula ate nga bannamateeka basirisa ab'ebibiina ebyenjawulo gattako n'abo abagatambuza mu ggwanga lya Uganda wabula ate anganyigiriza ekibiina ekya National Unity Platform agattako n'abanjawulo abali wansi w'ekibiina ekyo kale nno busungu bwereere ensonga n'okugamba nti ensonga bwe zitambudde ku sayidi eno abamu bo ab'emamaaza ku sayidi eyo yandibeera nga abasuuwinga so nga ate abalabudde n'abagamba nti ke kaseera babeere nga basalawo okulonda sayidi wa gye basobola okuba nte munange babeera ku sayidi ey'abantu ewa enyigiriza abantu oba sayidi erumirirwa abantu ogenda kuba obyekanya n'okugamba nti wano okkawo osanga ensonga ez'obujulizi ensonga ezoyogerera n'obeera ng'olaba biki ebitambula mu ggwanga lya Uganda sagala kubanga ate njogera nnyo okusinziira nti nakugambye n'olunaku lwanjawulo njagala nsukemukwe ku bubaka bwa His Excellency Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu ate munange obeere nga obwekanya wabula ate Sheikh Ashraf Dembe ye akugamba nti musaale nnyo mu kubanga ajjanjaba n'okuba ate munange agonjoola ebizibu byonna byolina mu bulamu bwo kalo gwalina ebyenjawulo ate munange beera nga omukoona ku namba y'essimu gy'olaba essembi ya 11 ajja kuba akuvumula ajja kuba ate munange awokomawo okumwebaza nakutegezaako nti obubaka bwenkwetikidde buwanvu kasooke mbwekweka ate munange osooke obeere nga obwekanya okomawo otengereko nagaleero.
Those who steal taxpayers' money are protected by the criminal justice system, while those who protest against them are punished. They are abducted, they are tortured, they are even raped in custody. Today, Uganda, and indeed the criminal justice system in Uganda, is teaching our children that it is okay to steal, but it is criminal to speak out against theft. The Supreme Court of Uganda, the highest court of the land, passes a judgment ordering the state to stop trying civilians in military courts, and the regime simply ignores the decision. A decision of the highest court of the land, and business continues as usual. Elections are rigged with impunity. Petitions challenging the rigging are decided even before they are heard. Now this is even more painful. A justice of the Supreme Court had to run out of the country for fear of her life just because she dared to decide our petition judiciously. Her crime was stating that it was unreasonable to expect me to collect evidence and prepare my petition on time when I was under house arrest for more than half the time provided by the Constitution. Not even to say that that time is enough, but for more than half of the time I was in detention. And she mentioned it, and for that she is in exile. When we complain about all these illegalities, the courts are very quick to invoke the political question doctrine. Now, when courts choose doctrine over truth and theory over justice, then we find ourselves back to 1966. In 1966, the court was facing a violent overthrow of the 1962 Constitution. It chose political expediency over constitutional legitimacy. You all remember that in the case of Uganda versus Commission of Prisons, ex parte Matroda. The ruling in that case became the first post-colonial excuse, and every regime has used that to justify the using of guns to either silence or rewrite the law. Friends, you remember some 10 years ago, Professor Lwakunyigiriza wrote, and I agreed with him, he wrote about this case and said, in many ways, this case was both an ending and the beginning of Uganda. A very dangerous precedent was set, and it has continued to be an excuse to justify military takeovers and fraudulent elections to the present day. Now, another even more disturbing excuse which continues to impede our democracy is the so-called substantiality test. Under Section 61 of the Presidential Elections Act, the election of a presidential candidate can only be annulled upon proof, among others, that there was non-compliance with the law governing presidential elections, and please listen to this part very carefully, and that compliance affected the election result in a substantial manner. What do they mean, substantial manner? What exactly do they mean? You will note that in all the past presidential election petitions, the Supreme Court of Uganda has always conveniently used this so-called substantiality test as an excuse to overlook the proven and glaring vote rigging together with the electoral violence by the military and the police. All that has always been done in favor of General 7, but the court has always overlooked that. Even when they know that every single act of rigging or every irregularity, however big or however small it is, was done precisely to alter the result of the election, and also knowing very clearly that no one rigs the election just for the sake of rigging. They rig it to win. But again, they always bring the substantiality test as an excuse, and they always overlook the facts to decide what they want to decide. Friends, lawyers should have the moral courage to call it exactly what it is: judicial cowardice, dressed as legal doctrine. Ladies and gentlemen, that judicial cowardice is what has failed our democracy, and it has kept our country moving in circles. It ignores the reality that in Uganda, electoral malpractice happens throughout the entire electoral process, from pre-electoral times to post-electoral times. I mean, you see abductions, you see torture of opponents, you see gerrymandering, you see internet blackouts, you see military deployments, you see open briberies, etc., etc. You don't just see the ballot stuffing and rigging on the day of the election. It happens long before, it happens during, and it happens long after. But the courts of law have always closed their eyes to that. If we had the rule of law in Uganda, what is named, then this was supposed to shape the entire legitimacy of the entire electoral process, but it does not. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court chooses to favor the regime just because they feel safe doing that than upholding the rule of law. So, dear land friends, I think it is high time that lawyers stop acting like they are safe in this burning house called Uganda. Friends, you are not safe. In a burning house, in a sinking boat, nobody is safe, so don't even lie to yourself. We are here, but I look around and see that all of you lawyers are just as vulnerable as the ghetto people where I come from. Right before me, Councilman Bobiwine was there, was abducted and kept incommunicado for almost a week. He is a lawyer. That alone is supposed to speak to all of us, ladies and gentlemen. Peter Chidiamo was a lawyer, but when he walked into a reckless community, he was suspected of being a thief, and he was beaten to death. Ivan Bakesiga was a successful lawyer in his own right, but when illness came, he was as vulnerable as anybody else. He tried to fundraise, but eventually he died. All of us, I mean, who does not remember Bob Kasango? Yes, he was controversial, but he was a very good lawyer, and he was a very wealthy man. by any standards. But he died in prison, denied bail, and by extension denied the medical attention that he so badly needed. He passed away. Now I want all of you present here today and those watching us online to ask yourself that if Mudiole, a renowned lawyer, if Bob Kasango, if Ivan, if Peter, if they're not safe, why do you think you are safe? Why do you think you're any different? Now, please remember that no one is safe in a lawless society. Not even you, the lawyers. You may have degrees, you may have titles, you may be successful, you may be well known. But when this regime crashes constitutionalism completely, you are the next that they're going to come for. I promise you that. If Uganda collapses, as we all see, it surely will. If we don't do what we must do, every one of us is going to be as vulnerable. If the country burns, it will burn you as hot as it burns a border rider in Chifumbira or in Chevani or in Kamacha. You're not going to be any different. So, my dear land friends, my humble request is that you join the rest of the citizens in saving this country. You lawyers of all citizens, best understand the problem of Uganda. And by that, you can be part of the solution if you choose to be. And that way, we shall all be safe. Because like we continuously say, all of us will be safe or no one will be safe. I want you to remember, ladies and gentlemen, that history is calling different generations of lawyers in Uganda. I've always risen to the occasion whenever history has called. We all remember that it was lawyers, including the now gone Justice Kanyamba. It was lawyers that were the driving force in the Moshu Conference, which culminated into the liberation of Uganda from the Amin dictatorship. And yes, it was lawyers like Council Sam Njuba, who was once president of this very society, the Uganda Law Society, that rose to the occasion, closed his chambers, folded his sleeves, and joined the rest of the citizens in the 80s to try and liberate this country and return the rule of law that he so dearly believed in. He did not sit in his chambers when history was calling for his involvement. He got involved, and you too can get involved. I want you to know, friends, that while you're young, while you might look at yourself as unready, please be reminded that we are the Kanyamahambas of this generation. We are the Sam Njubas of this generation. Do not doubt your abilities. There is no other important time to take action than now. Allow me to also remind you, dear land friends, that this right here is the most consequential time in history of Uganda. This right here is the most effective time for you to get involved. This is the most interesting time to be alive and to be mature and to be in this room. This time. The second best, no, the best was yesterday, the second best is now. The best, and then do what we must do. I'll also borrow some words from the great author called Franz Fanon. He said, every generation must discover its mission and then decide to either pursue and fulfill that mission or betray it. I have no doubt that you lawyers here have already discovered your mission, and the world is looking at you to watch you either pursue that mission and fulfill it or betray that mission for convenience. The ball is right in your hands. Friends, you are the hope of this generation. You are the lawyers of this generation. When history is being written, your name will be among the lawyers that were present in 2025 when everything is going south. So we are already having the responsibility and the burden on our shoulders. I want to tell you, friends, that it is not enough for you lawyers to protect your contracts. It is not enough for you to represent banks and big businesses while you're ignoring the political prisoners. Some lawyers say they are neutral. They say the law is not political. But the law has always been political. I mean, it is political when Bobiwine is taken to prison for putting on red. It is political when Justice Chisache runs to exile just because she ruled against the regime. So lawyers must pick a side because justice in itself is political. And in a time of injustice, neutrality is complicity. In this time, lawyers must pick a side, either the side of the law or the side of lawlessness. You cannot stay in the middle. I want to pause and I want to request most of you, in fact all of us, to pause for a second and imagine this. The Attorney General, the chambers of the Attorney General of this country, a man who brought the UPDF Act Amendment of 2025 to drag civilians back into military tribunals. His chambers share a wall with these very headquarters of Uganda Law Society. Please pause and think about that. I will say that again. The private chambers of the Attorney General, of the man, the Attorney General, the man who presented the UPDF Amendment Act of 2025 to drag civilians back to military courts. These chambers are sharing the wall with the Uganda Law Society office where we are now. And his partner in those chambers is not just any other lawyer. He is the son-in-law of General Museveni, the man at the head of this regime. So now that is legal political marriage standing just meters away from us. Just pause and imagine that for a second. The politics is in the law, and the law is in the politics. They are both mixed and mingled. And yet some lawyers say they are neutral. They say the law is not political. And meanwhile, the president of the Uganda Law Society, Council Isaac Semakande, is in exile.
Abalungi abatuuliriza era abatulaba olunaku olwaleero tuchaddeko ewa Sheikh Asiraf Dembe.
Sebo sanyusa okubalaba amannya agange nze Sheikh Asiraf Dembe akola ku bizibu by'enjawulo. Omuntu singa aba alina ebirwadde musomereddwa tumuwa amazzi ga lukuya nga bw'obadde ogalaba tugenda abantu ku kyoto ne twokya emizimu emibi egibabaamu n'okulomba edduwa. Abantu singa abeera ng'ali wano atuuse sobola okumulombera edduwa ne waba atatuuse nga mpadde amannya ge naye ng'ali wala maneetaase. Enamba yange yeno eri 0707763711. Namwe bannyinaffe abali ebweru oyagala okuba nti oyagala okulombera ku dduwa ng'olina ebizibu viza zibuze amaka gakolongotana sente zikola zimpita mu ngalo ojja kumpeereza ekifaananyi kyo n'amanyago ebyo byokka bijja kummala nja kukulombera edduwa ojja kutereera. Olunaku olusembayo mu mwezi mba n'edduwa eyawamu ffenna n'abalwadde bange abakadde n'abapya. Salaamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.